Good morning, Year 6. I hope you're all doing great. Can you believe it? We're officially halfway through the year. 30th of June. Tomorrow is the 1st of July. There's only 30 days in June. Remember, 30 days has September, April, June, and November. So tomorrow's a new month and the 7th month of the year. It's amazing how quickly time has flown. But without further ado, let's get started on our lesson today. So as I said to you yesterday, today we're going to be looking at equivalent ratios. So I trust you would have heard the word equivalent before, maybe when we're talking about fractions. So equivalent means two things which have the same value, but can be represented in different ways. So without further ado, writing down our date in Roman numerals, and our learning intention, let's begin. For today's lesson, you will need your pencil, paper, thinking hats, the worksheet emailed to you this morning on equivalent ratios, and your 5-minute timer. Check. So, haven't done one of these in a while, have we? I'd like you to pause the video here and have a go answering the question shown on screen. Brilliant. Let's go through the answers. So I'll whiz through them, and if there's any that you find particularly tricky, then send us an email and we'll explain them to you. I've got a few children in Year 6 who are particularly good at just emailing over any problems, anything they found a bit tricky, and then working hard to make sure that they've understood it. And we're happy to do that. In fact, we want to do that, so that's great. So for the first one, the answer is 1,250. For number 2, the answer is 34,000. Number 3, 94,085. Number 4, 2/5. Number 5, 19/20. Number 6, 1020.3. And for problem solving, it says a crisp factory needs to make 8,375 bags an hour. If a machine breaks down and the factory only makes 3,233 bags in 1 hour, then how many does it need to make in the next hour to catch up? So if we've got 8,375, we know that in 2 hours that company would have made 16,750. But they only made 3,233 in the next hour. So in the second hour, in order for them to meet their target, they're going to need to make up what they missed from the first hour, plus add on what they would usually make in an hour. So we know they usually make 8,375 in an hour, but they didn't quite make that in the first hour. So they'll need to find out the difference from that and then add that on to 8,375. Or they could just do 16,750 minus 3,233, which gives us 13,517. That's how much they'll need to make in the second hour to catch up on the first hour. That's a big ask, isn't it? So our reasoning question is 2,242 divided by 59 equals 38, and it asks us to prove it. So we could use the bus stop method shown on screen to prove that is in fact correct. So well done if you managed to get those. Now let's have a look at some ratio questions. We're going to recap some questions that we should be able to answer based on what we've learnt so far. So before we begin, let's discuss some key vocabulary. We've got the word compare. When we're comparing, we're looking at one thing in relation to another. We've got the word equivalent. So equivalent means two things that have the same value but can be represented differently. We've got the word ratio, and ratio is when we're looking at the relationship from one thing to another and representing it, usually numerically and with a colon in the center. And simplify is when we are representing a problem in its simplest form, so using the lowest value numbers that we can. So I'd like you to just pause the video here and have a go at working through the questions in the green, the red or pink, and purple section. The green section being the easiest and the purple being the most difficult. Brilliant. Now let's go through the answers. So for the first section, write the number of blue squares to the number of yellow squares as a ratio, There are 5 blue squares and 4 yellow squares, so that's written as 5 to 4. Make sure you've got your numbers the right way around there. And for the second section, it says simplify 26 to 13. Now, if we look at the number 26, we know it's an even number. If we were to halve it, we'd get 13. So there are 2 13s in 26 and 1 13 in 13. The highest common factor between 26 and 13 is 13. So our ratio there is 2 to 1. Now 64 centimetres to 4 metres. You might have looked at this and thought, yes, the highest common factor there I think is going to be 4. But some of you, and most of you, would have realised that in fact they have different units of measure. And before we can simplify it, we need to make sure that they're using the same units of measure. So 4 metres, we know that there are 100 centimetres in 1 metre. That means there are 400 centimetres in 4 metres. So now we've got 64 centimetres to 400 centimetres. What's the highest common factor between these two numbers? Well, the highest common factor is 16. So 64 divided by 16 gives us 4. And 400 divided by 16 gives us 25. But it's unlikely that you divided it by 16. What you probably did is looked at 64 and 400 and thought, well, I know that 64 has a factor of 8. And I know that 400 will have a factor of 8 because 40 is a multiple of 8. So 400 will also be a multiple of 8. So 64 divided by 8 would have given you 8. And 400 divided by 8 would have given you 50. Then you would have had a ratio of 8 to 50. And I know you would have looked at that and said, both of those are even numbers, so I can simplify this ratio even more. And then you would have gone down and halved them both to get 4 to 25. So well done. A dessert has both fruit and yogurt inside. Altogether, the mass of the fruit and yogurt is 175 grams. The ratio of the mass of fruit to the mass of yogurt is 2 to 5. What is the mass of the yogurt? So the answer is 125 grams. But I'm sure you probably don't want to just know that. You want to know, how do we find the answer? We get the answer. We know our ratio was 2 to 5. That makes a total of 7. It tells us that the mass of the fruit and yogurt was 175. So to get from 7 to 175, we had to multiply by 25. Whatever we multiply by to get the total is what we have to multiply the individual numbers which make up our ratio by as well. So we would do, if we want to find out the mass of fruit, we would do 2 times 25. But we've been asked what's the mass of yogurt. So we're going to do 5 times 25. And 5 times 25 gives us 125 grams. So well done if you managed to get that one. No, it's a bit trickier. So today we're looking at equivalent ratios. So ratios that are the same but represented differently. So here on screen you'll see we've got 2 to 1. We've got 2 stars to 1 heart. In the next box we have an equivalent ratio. We've still got in that box 2 stars to every 1 heart. Can you see, if I put them in groups, we've still got 2 stars to 1 heart, 2 stars to 1 heart. Even though we've got more stars, we just had to make sure we had more hearts to match up with it. So those two are equivalent ratios. And in the last box, we've got 6 to 3. Again, we've got 2 stars to every 1 heart, just like we have in the first box. So those are also equivalent ratios. 6 to 3, 4 to 2, and 2 to 1 are all equivalent. But imagine we haven't got time to draw all these pictures out every single time. Instead, we can just look at the relationship between the numbers. Whatever I multiply the one number by, I must multiply the second by. So going back to the pictures at the top, to get from 2 stars to 1 heart to 6 stars to 3 hearts, I've multiplied the 2 by 3 to get to 6, and I've multiplied the 1 by 3 to get to 3. At the bottom, you'll see another example of 3 to 4, which is equivalent to 15 to 20. All I've done is I've times the 3 by 5, and then I've times the 4 by 5, and I have an equivalent ratio. And I've done the same with 12 to 8. So equivalent ratios, that's all it means. It means we still have what we have in the lowest form. We still have it, but it's just grouped. There is a number of those groups within a larger amount. Okay, but it's still a ratio of 2 to 1. Think about when we go on a school trip and we have a ratio of 1 adult to 6 children. That doesn't mean in one class there's only 1 adult and 6 children. We have about 30 children in each class. So it means that we have 1 adult to 6 children, another adult we take from another class to 6 children, and another adult to 6 children. So a ratio, we could say that's a ratio of, it's a ratio of 1 to 6, or instead we could say it's a ratio of 5 to 30. It would still be the same. Okay, still exactly the same. Now let's look at some more examples. On your mini whiteboards, if you have one at home, or if not on a piece of paper, I just want you to write down the ratio of red to yellow faces shown on the right. Can you write down some equivalent ratios as well? Pause the video here and write those down. Excellent. So we've got 4 to 2. 4 red faces to 2 yellow faces. Equivalent ratios could also be, if we add another group, we can see it's still a ratio of 4 to 2, but instead we could also now say we've got 8 to 4. And that will be written like this. And we can see the relationship there. We've doubled the 4, we've doubled the 2. But they're still the same. It's still groups of 4 red faces to every 2 yellow faces. And we could do the same by adding another group. Here we've got 12 red faces to 6 yellow faces. That's a ratio of 12 to 6. 4 to 2, 8 to 4, 12 to 6, they are all equivalent. They are the same ratios. Have a look at the faces shown on screen. I would like you to write down the ratio of red to yellow faces. Excellent. Now write down 4 equivalent ratios. Excellent. So you might have written down a number. There are so many equivalent ratios that you could have written down, but I'll show you an example of some. So we know we have 7 red faces to 3 yellow faces. So you might have times that by 2 and got 14 to 6, or times it by 3 and got 21 to 9, times it by 10 and got 70 to 30, or times it by 20 and got 140 to 60. Whatever you times one side by, you had to multiply the other side by. As long as you did that, then your ratio is correct. Now let's try another one. Write down the ratio of red to yellow faces to the right, excuse me, and then write down as many equivalent ones as you can. So we've got 8 to 4, 8 red faces to 4 yellow faces, and then write down the four equivalent ratios. Brilliant. So again, there's so many you could have had, but if you'd have halved them, so if you halve one number, you can halve the other as well. So we talked a lot about multiplying them, but if they're not in the simplest form, we can also get it to its simplest form, break it down a bit more. So 4 to 2, if I halve the 8 and halve the 4, and then I can halve the 4 and halve the 2 and get 2 to 1. And then I can also double the 8 and double the 4 to get 16 to 8. And I can do 8 times 4 and 4 times 4 to get 32 to 16. But like I said, whatever you've done, whatever you've done to one side, as long as you've done it to the other, you've got the right answer. Now here, I'd like you to do exactly the same, but I'd like you to write down as many equivalent fractions as you can. So set yourself a 2-minute timer and write down as many as you can. Brilliant. Let's go through them. So 5 to 3 is the one shown on screen. Could have had times it by 2 and get 10 to 6, 15 to 9. And I'm sure you're getting the idea. These are all some that you could have had, but you could have had many, many more. So well done if you got those. One more there for you. Now look at the 2 ratios shown on screen. We've got 7 to 20 and 21 to 60. Are they equivalent? Well, yes they are, because we've done 7 times 3 to get to 21 and 20 times 3 to get to 60. So they are equivalent ratios. Now lastly, before you go, I'd like you to have a go at answering the questions shown on screen. It covers all of what we have learnt so far, so it shouldn't be too tricky for you. So pause the video and off you go. Brilliant. Let's go through the answers. So 3 to 2 is the same as 9 to 6. Both of those are multiplied by 3. For 1b, 7 to 12 is the same as 56 to 96, as both of those are multiplied by 8. 15 to 11 is the same as 60 to 44, as both of those have been multiplied by 4. And 13 to 14 is the same as 78 to 84, as both of those have been multiplied. Both of those have been multiplied by 6. And 3 to 5 to 7, well, both of those, all of those numbers, 5 and has been multiplied by 9 to get to 45, and so 3 is multiplied by 9 to get 27. 7 multiplied by 9 gives us 63. Number 2, the ratio of men to women in a golf club is 8 to 5. There are 64 men in the club. How many women are there? Well, we know on our ratios, so it might be a good idea to just write down on a piece of paper, men, leave a space, and then write the word women. Underneath the word men, write down 8, and underneath the word women, write down 5. Then underneath the 8, write down 64. What have you had to multiply 8 by to get to 64? That's right, you've multiplied it by 8. So do the same with the women. Multiply it by 8 and you get 40. Number 3. In a school, the ratio of teachers to students is 2 to 35. So on your paper, you might want to write down, if you didn't feel confident with this one, you might want to write down teachers on one side, students on another side. Write down 2 underneath teachers and 35 underneath students. Then underneath students, write down 1,120. Now, we still don't know what the teachers are. That's what the question's asking us. But before we can do that, we need to work out what we've multiplied 35 by to get to 1,120. Now, the way to work that out is to use the bus stop method and do 1,120 divided by 35, which should give you, if you've done it correctly, 32. So now you know you've multiplied 35 by 32 to get to 1,120. So 2 times 32 gives us 64. So there are 64 teachers to every 1,120 students in this school. Number 4. Part of a cake is made of sugar and butter in the ratio 2 to 3. So you might want to write down sugar on one side, butter on the other, and write down 2 underneath sugar and 3 underneath butter. How many grams of sugar do you need when you have 150 grams of butter? So if you write down 150 underneath the 3, what have you multiplied 3 by to get to 150? That's right, you've multiplied it by 50. So you could do it as the inverse, 150 divided by 3, which gives you 50. So then we do the same with the 2. And 2 times 50 gives us 100. So our answer there is 100 grams of sugar. And I think with ratio, how you lay it out is quite important because it helps you know exactly what it is that you're missing or what it is that you're trying to find out. And for number 5, Lucy, Adam, and Alex. So there are 3 elements to our ratio. Lucy, Adam, and Alex share money in the ratio 3 to 2 to 5. So the 3 represents Lucy, the 2 represents Adam, and the 5 represents Alex. So I suggest that you write those names out on your paper and write down the numbers underneath the names. Brilliant. Now we only know about Adam. Adam gets 48. So underneath the 2, I'd like you to write 48. What do we have to multiply 2 by to get to 48? You might know that off the top of your head, or you might need to do the inverse. 48 divided by 2, which gives us 24. So now we know we're multiplying by 24. So 3 times 24 gives us 72. And one way to work that out might be to do 3 times 12 and then double it. So 3 times 12 is 36 and then double it if you want to do it mentally. And then we need to do 5 times 24. So the way to do that mentally might be to do 10 times 24 and then halve it, which gives you 120. Or you might have done 5 times 12 and then from that you might have doubled that instead. Okay, so that gives you 120. So well done if you managed to get all of those. You're doing brilliantly with ratios. What next? You were sent a worksheet this morning on equivalent ratios. So I'd like you to complete the worksheet, and I can't wait to see the word problems that you come up with for the ratios shown at the bottom of the screen. If you're not sure, have a look back through previous lessons and see some of the word problems that we have talked about previously. Email us all of your amazing work at the email address shown on screen. Have a great day, Year 6. Bye.